Crash Bandicoot. Mention this name to any kid who grew up in the 90s and they will instantly be teleported back to a Friday night in 1998. School was over for the weekend, and you had 2 full days of doing nothing but playing football with your mates. But how would you start off your weekend? Well, with a nice long session on your PlayStation. And what game did you play? Oh yeah, a Crash Bandicoot game. Essentially, the Crash games were aimed at children. But there was something about it which appealed to all audiences and made the original games all classics. There are a few questions you have to ask yourself though. What made Crash so successful? What set him apart from Sonic and Mario? How did he become the image of a video game console that many believed would fail? And how did he help the PlayStation debut in the middle of the great Nintendo-Sega war and beat both of them in the sales? That's something that this documentary will be looking at. But every story has an origin. Crash's humble beginnings start much further back in the past than you may think. In fact, it starts in 1984. Video games were still fairly new, and they were only in their second generation. Games looked more like Microsoft Paint pictures done by 5-year-olds, and it was a much more humble time, and they followed very different rules to what we have now. You see, in today's gaming world, there's only 3 home consoles: the Xbox 360, the PlayStation 3, and the Wii. But back then, anybody could create a system and release it, and anybody can make a game for these systems and sell it. The system was chock full of dozens of consoles, many of them just clones of more successful versions. But the top dog in the gaming world was Atari, the creators of the popular home version of Pong. The Atari 2600 was, dollar for dollar, probably the most successful video game system in existence. However, like I stated, the gaming market was full of different gaming choices, and each had their own library back then, and most of the games were god-awful. And I'm not saying that because of the graphics, they were truly bad. 2 games in particular are famous for their pure suckage, and that's the E.T. game and the port for Pac-Man, both on the Atari 2600. Add these all together and you get a flooded market of mediocre products that the customers don't want. The video game industry suffered a crash that caused many companies to go bankrupt and almost destroyed an entire industry. The once great Atari tried to recover their great loss, and to this day they have never managed to recover from this gaming disaster. Instead, they became video game developers. While the fires of the second generation game consoles continued to burn, 2 new companies rised in their place to fight over the #1 spot. The first was called Sega, with their game console named the Sega Master System, which became the most popular console in Europe and Australia. But the other was a company that started its roots by creating cards. Nintendo, with their console named the Nintendo Entertainment System, which was consistently more popular in the States and Japan. This video game war between Nintendo and Sega continued past the 3rd generation of consoles and well into the 4th generation too, as Sega released their console, the Sega Genesis, or better known to us UK lot, the Sega Mega Drive, whereas Nintendo launched the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. At the same time, both companies were now backing mascots. Nintendo had used Mario for years, even before the NES was around, whereas Sega had created its own mascot on a blue hedgehog that could run super fast, named Sonic the Hedgehog. For some reason, many companies tried to mimic this animal with attitude, creating their own characters similar to Sonic in some way, but most of these games were unbelievably poor and failed in the market. As the Sega Nintendo war raged on, each company tried to get one up on the other. Sega's newest idea to get a decent blow against Nintendo was to create a CD-based add-on to their Genesis named the Sega CD. Nintendo wanted to fight back by creating their own version of a CD-based add-on to the Super NES. So Nintendo went to their fellow Japanese electrical company, Sony. Now Nintendo and Sony made a deal to make this new add-on. However, at the same time, Nintendo went to Panasonic and made the exact same deal with them. Both Sony and Panasonic were now working on their own separate CD-based add-ons. But this now meant that Nintendo had to drop one of the companies. And it was Sony that got the boot, and the official partner for the Super NES was Panasonic. Sony was kicked to the curb. All that hard work, that money, and those hours put into this new system, and for nothing. Sony felt like Nintendo had just stabbed them in the back and made the deal on purpose to try and waste the company's time, money and resources. Sony wanted to get their own back on Nintendo and decided to continue with their original project. But instead of releasing the system as an add-on, they released it independently and named it the PlayStation. You may think that this caused Nintendo to become worried, but in fact Nintendo wasn't that worried at all, because Sega's add-on, the Sega CD, failed miserably in the market. In fact, the majority of CD-based consoles or add-ons failed in the market, causing gaming developers to believe that the future of video games were to remain in cartridges. Yet as the PlayStation's hype continued thanks to its clever marketing campaign and the fact that it was the first major console to utilise 3D graphics realistically, at the time, Nintendo was starting to get more and more nervous, even trying to start a legal battle to stop the PlayStation's release. But in 1995, the PlayStation was released in Japan, and not long after, it hit the shores of Europe and America. The system had a strong number of released titles, but one of these game titles not only pushed the PlayStation to gaming levels even Nintendo couldn't reach, but it would also become legendary for being the first and only video game mascot to knock Mario off as the most recognisable gaming character in the world. This game was Crash Bandicoot.